straight from the mayor's mouth, with Matthew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.
Hello there everyone, and welcome to Straight from the Mayor's Mouth. Hello there, Matt, how are you?
Hey, really good this week, thanks, Mark. Thanks for asking.
Oh, mate, well, just the way I roll, isn't it? We're very personal here on this podcast. Hey, listen, let's start off by that whole wonderful new track down there that's been put in there, the new path, the cement path down there, on, of course, where our park run is. Now, of course, during the week, it's all been set up and ready to go. I was down there this week with the park run. My time, unfortunately, has not been improved at all by the lay of the new cement, but you seem to be absolutely flying, may I say, on Saturday. How'd you go?
Well, I did declare previously that there might have been a conflict of interest with us putting that new concrete path in.
Yes, I do recall that, yes.
And so I'm pleased to announce that, yes, I did my best time of the year.
You're kidding.
Is that right? On that new concrete path this week. So
well, I'm glad to see it improve someone around here in regards to their timing. That's fantastic.
It was interesting after Park Run, though, the number of people who mentioned it to me. Mm-hmm. So as you know, you stand around after Park Run and have a bit of a chat to a couple of hundred people as
you chat. Around. I normally sit there and try to get my breath back.
Well, I do that before I start chatting. But, yeah, many people came up to me and said, oh, that new path's great. I really like it. Gee, it's been done well. It's nice and wide, so it's got a good bit of width about it there. And obviously there's the trees already that have been planted where the old path was, as we talked about before, the regeneration there to try and hold that riverbank there together. So some trees have already been planted there to try and start that process. So it looks good down there. Our staff have done a wonderful job. They said it'd take 2 weeks. It took a little bit less than 2 weeks to get it all finished.
Went in very, very quickly, actually. I was surprised how fast it took.
And that included a bit of rain because they did have stop work for a couple of days there. I remember where it was raining a little bit there. So they've done a great job there. And, very well received by park runners. So well done to our staff.
Particularly yourself, I say. So well done in your record time. Outstanding.
Thank you.
Now, mate, of course, last week you had the council meeting. There's quite a lot to get through here today. So in today's podcast, we do have a fair bit to get through, and in particular I want to start off with, looks as though there's a decision's been made and finally signed off in regards to the budget. So tell me, how did it all go on Thursday night last week?
It's arguably the biggest meeting of the year, the most exciting, can I say that?
Exciting, budgets together. Excellent.
Most important meeting of the year.
Oh, there you go. That's probably a word that most people appreciate, yes.
Because if we don't approve the budget before the 30th of June, well then the 1st of July, council operations effectively grind to a halt. It used to be, back in my previous term on council, it used to be there'd be an extraordinary meeting held the last Friday of the financial year to approve the budget. So you had no room to move there. That's right, you had to get it done there. This now seems to be the process where it's just done at the normal last council meeting of the ordinary council meeting in June, and that's fine. But it was a longer meeting than normal. It went till about 9:15 or thereabouts on Thursday night. And one of the things I really was impressed with the budget was that we received a lot of submissions. And to me, that says that people are interested, they're focused on good outcomes for the community. 67 separate submissions, 197 topics were covered in those submissions.
That's a lot of submissions and a lot of topics.
Yeah, that's right. And it depends how you slice it and dice it. There's a lot of different ways to look at a budget, but you could probably say in very round numbers, it's up around almost a $250 million budget.
That's a big budget when you think about it. That's $250 million.
That's a lot of money, and that's expenditure in a year. So that's one part of that process. So you can see it is a big business. Council is a big business without a doubt. And we do run a number of operations outside just the core focus of council. And that's one of the things I actually find interesting when we do talk to Sydney councillors, for example. Sydney councillors are often the standard roads, rates and rubbish.
Yes.
Whereas regional councils, and not just Dubbo, but regional councils are typically dealing with a whole range of other areas. So you've got a budget that focuses on the core activities of council, but then you've got things like a water treatment plant and a sewage treatment plant, and then you've got business units like an airport.
Yes.
So there's a whole range of different things that you're running, and they've all got to be accounted for in that overall budget. So I really like the work that our staff have done this year, multiple workshops. They've been presenting the information in ways.
Well, it's been a huge process, hasn't it, really, to get to this stage?
It has been, and that's fair enough. You wouldn't want to take 5 minutes for a large budget to go through. But I think the great thing about it is that the staff have been listening to feedback from councillors and presenting the information in a way that makes more sense to councillors, because many councillors have got a business background and they're looking for information to be presented in a business-like way. But on council, then it seems to be presented in a slightly different format. And if you're in council circles, it makes sense. But when you've come from a business background and you look at it, some of the parts are a little bit different. But I think the staff have done a really good job along those lines to make sure that we're getting the information in the way we need it as a councillor. And one of the things that's important, absolutely critical, is that, and I think these councillors that we've got now are doing a really good job of this, if the information isn't presented in a way that gives you enough information, our councillors say, I can't make a decision on this. And we have had some items previously deferred because councillors said, no, I'm being asked to make a decision. I need more information, or the information presented differently, or better information before I go and make a decision. So the councillors have been really good with that. But the budget, again, I'm pretty happy with where we got to. I'm pretty happy with the process. I'm not happy with the extra money that the state government whacked onto our bottom line after the draft budget was on display, the $2.5 million there. But in the end, I think we got there. And I think in general, not everyone in the community loves some of the things that we might have been able to deliver on all those 197 different topics. But I think in general, we've come up with a pretty good outcome.
Oh, well done. All right, now, I'm not going to go through all of these budget decisions that have been made in regards to it, but there are a few, though, that sort of stood out that I'd like to have a bit of a chat about. Look, one of the things that seems to have come up here is in regards to Sheraton Road. Now, Sheraton Road's been one of those points of discussion we've discussed a few times on the podcast. And I know that one of the things we've talked about is in regards to creating options there for safety for the kids that are walking from the schooling sector there out into the New South Lakes area and things like that. So it looks as though there's been some money allocated for some footpaths to be put on there. Is that correct?
One footpath, definitely.
Okay.
And as we've talked about before, we don't have a little secret bucket off to the side that has other projects and we just take some money out of that. So it's always a give and a take. And so councillors looked at this one in particular. We'd heard the feedback from the schools and from residents about the need for safety along Sheraton Road, about people being able to walk along there, often students obviously walking along there.
Yeah.
But as we know, as we've talked about before, we've got some major reconstruction works, so why would we go and do...
You're putting in a permanent footpath here? Like, is this seems to go contrary if it's permanent in regards to what some of the long-term thoughts are?
And that's the problem. Putting in a permanent footpath isn't really practical because that would mean you'd need to go and do some of the permanent work to the road, which, as we know from previous discussions, we're not at that level of doing.
I was going to say it hasn't been brought forward or anything, has it?
No, that's exactly right. It hasn't been. So we looked at that and we were a bit compromised in some ways because we want to do good asset maintenance long term. And one of the things in our budget for asset maintenance was some curb and guttering works around Brisbane and Gibb Street. And so when you talk to our staff about good long-term maintenance, that's at the point now it needs to be renewed. So logically, an asset renewal, we do that. But then you look at the safety of the kids around the schools in Sheraton Road. And so in the end, councils as part of the budget said we take money from that Brisbane and Gibb Street curb and guttering work that needs to be done.
Okay.
So that essentially means that's not going to be done in this next financial year. So it will delay that project and put that money in towards a temporary footpath along Sheraton Road.
So it's going to be a temporary base, what is like a hard granite type thing? Is that the plan? Or
some sort of crushed granite, I imagine it would be there. So not a concrete path, not like the beautiful new Trucker-Riley concrete path.
That's right.
But the crushed granite like in other parts of Trucker-Riley, something like that. And that would then run alongside Sheraton Road, so give somewhere for kids to ride their bike or walk down that area there.
Yep.
And more than likely, there'll be very little work that will be done on that will be then utilised long term when Sheraton Road is upgraded. So it's not, you look at that and you think, well, is that the best way to use ratepayers' money to do something that in a couple of years' time you'll probably just remove or it'll be done again properly.
But there is a prioritisation of safety there you brought in this one.
So it was a tough decision. And there was a fair bit of discussion around that because they're the sort of decisions that are really tough. No, that's a silly way to use our money. That's a waste of money. But what about the safety of the kids? So you're always weighing up those different options. So that's one, again, budget discussions, workshops, etc. That's one that we came up with. So that'll happen in this next financial year. We'll have that footpath. I want to say temporary footpath. It'll be fine as a footpath. It just means it won't be there long term. At some stage in the next couple of years, that'll be removed and a proper footpath put in.
It's a good decision. Another little point that I'd like to talk about in regards to the budget here is it appears as though there's been some money allocated for highway mowing. Now, I'm assuming this must be the entrance points into the town and sort of saying here the fact, though, that initially looks like there might have been an allocation of about $370,000 put down there for highway mowing, But this has been cut back to $270,000. Has there been money put aside in the past for the maintaining the entrances in the town and that type of stuff? Or what's actually happened here with this extra distribution of money as well?
Yeah, most recently the budget had zero for the entrances.
Oh, so there's no money. There was no money set up for entrance mowing and maintaining.
No, previously, many years ago, there was, and we used to try and keep those entrances looking good. But it's just gotten to the point where our outdoor team, a lot of pressure for a lot of work that needs to be done. We've got wonderful parks, we've got sporting fields, we've got Track O'Reilly Cycleway, we've got all these different areas that we're trying to maintain. And it just got to the point that something had to give. And this is the problem you have. When you've got a limited amount of money, when you've got X dollars in the budget and you want extra things done, sometimes you just can't do them. You just got to make do with what you've got. So it was a decision previously made to say, well, we could let various parks get longer in terms of their grass or not maintain them at the same level and keep doing the entrances or cut back the highway entrances. So the decision was made previously to cut back that. Councillors had a bit of feedback from that. Didn't look great when you drove into the city. So we had some discussions around that as part of this budget discussion to say, let's put some money into that. So we ended up with our draft budget where we'd actually allocated $370,000 to do that highway.
So initially in the
maintenance.
draft budget, there was $370,000 had been allocated to it. It's now been cut back to $270,000, which is still $270,000 more than it was last year.
And you're right. And the result of that will be that there'll now be some maintenance work done for those entrances, but not as often as it would have been done with $370,000. And because an argument was put forward to say, it'd be nice to put some money into street trees, to do some additional planting of street trees.
So that's where the extra money's gone to, has it? So the
Correct.
$100,000 that we've taken from the $370,000 has been put now into street trees.
Yep, and you can see exactly what you're doing there is exactly the juggling act you're doing. So there was a discussion that was brought forward. It'd be nice to have some money for street trees. How are we going to do that? Again, can't pull it from nowhere. Where are we going to pull it from? Discussed around the different programs.
Has there been any money for street trees in the past? Or
Years gone by there has been, but in most recent year, again, no.
Okay.
So, and these things ebb and flow. There's sometimes money in budgets for certain things and you might move that money and say, well, let's use it in other areas now. So there was an argument put forward, and I think an absolutely valid argument put forward to say we need to put some more money in towards street trees. Oh, where are we going to get that money from? So again, let's see, we've got this extra 370. Well, maybe we could get by, and let's see how 270 goes for us. And that'll be a bit of a test over the next year. We'll have the maintenance levels at 270 that will afford us a certain level of maintenance of those highway entrances. Let's see what the feedback is from the community. We as councillors will look at that ourselves. The staff will judge that and then put that $100,000 into street trees.
So that highway maintenance, are we just talking here about just mowing the edges, or is it cleaning up the areas as well, or what does it actually entail?
It really is just mowing and whippy-snipping the areas there. So keeping the areas tidy. Sure, if there's a big bit of rubbish there, you'd probably do that, but it's not designed for our staff to go out and have a rubbish bag and go along and start picking up that rubbish. And that's where it's great, some of the volunteer groups that do Clean Up Australia sort of days where they do some of that maintenance, which is absolutely fantastic.
Absolutely.
Again, you've got to be careful with cars. So a lot of those programs focus more around, say, the river more than on the highways. But no, this is really about maintaining the mowing and keeping those areas looking nicer from that perspective.
Oh, fantastic. Now, this next little one comes up in regards to Rainbow Cottage Childcare. So this is a little childcare centre that council operates here in town. Now, I've noticed here there's part of the budget that there's been an increase of 8.5% to the actual running costs here, have been allocated now to the childcare centre. I suppose first and foremost, have we always been involved in childcare here as part of our business operations?
Well, one of the things that's interesting, isn't it, is that I mentioned before some of the various things that we do on council, and people don't always realise the things that we do. We own a childcare centre.
I didn't know that.
Since 1992, we've owned a childcare centre.
Oh.
We started that for some reason. That's before my time on council. I don't really know why we started it, but there must have been a need, a demand, and maybe back in 1992 there weren't many childcare centres.
Yes.
It may have been set up as a way to attract staff, so that maybe staff got preferential treatment, and that may have been the logic back in the early days, that if you worked at council, well, you can guarantee to get a spot in childcare because we've got our own childcare centre and we give preference to our staff. Might have been the case, but you talk about the different business operations of council. So we do own a caravan park.
Yes.
As I said before, we treat water. We've got 3 water treatment facilities. We've got sewage treatment we've got to do. These are all separate business units that we run.
Yep.
The old Dubbo Jail, that's a tourism facility. The Western Plains Cultural Centre. Wellington's Cage.
It's broad, isn't it? You know?
It is very broad. But again, there was a discussion, again before my time on council, I do remember, because we've had kids at Rainbow over the years, I do remember there was a discussion back maybe the early 2000s about council taking Rainbow out to be a separate committee.
Yeah.
I don't know they talked about selling it at that stage, but maybe a separate committee.
Yeah.
And that had people marching on council and protesting at council. And in the end, the councillors of the day decided to keep it there. One of the problems that we have at the moment at council is that last year Rainbow Cottage Childcare facility lost $430,000.
Right, okay.
As
Is this the reason for the 8.5% fee increase? Is that right?
Exactly right. So there's a discussion. This council has been very focused on making our bottom line better. So one business unit bleeding $430,000, that means it's being subsidised by the ratepayers of Dubbo to the tune of $430,000. And you look at that and you look at other childcare centres in Dubbo and you think, well, they're opening up. There's a lot of them opening up now. Surely they're making money.
20, 30, I suppose, in town. There'd be a lot
You'd
now,
have to
wouldn't
think,
there?
I don't know the number, you have to think 30, at least in Dubbo.
Yep.
And I see new ones opening up from time to time. And I think, well, they're not all opening up to lose money.
No.
Surely they're not all losing $430,000 a year.
Like if you're an independent operator, you don't want to be losing $430,000 a year.
And if it's a service to the community, in other words, if it's a park that everyone can go and throw a frisbee around or play sport on the weekend, you expect there to be a cost to council. But for childcare, the beneficiaries of childcare are the users of the childcare centre. So it seems unfair on the ratepayers of Dubbo to be subsidised to have paying a subsidy for people to go and use that childcare centre for the small number of parents in comparison to the whole
Is this
LGA.
potentially one of the business operations in town that must be looked at in regards to ongoing viability, I suppose?
Well, we are looking at all the business operations and whether we can take it external in some way, lease it out, for example, whether you sell them off, whether you have some sort of different management structure, or in this case, the decision of council was, well, while we're still looking at all those different options, let's put the prices up because we can't be fair to the ratepayers of Dubbo and keep bleeding $430,000. So 8.5%, you would argue is probably not much more than the real CPI, but certainly more than the rate pegging amount, the 3.7% rate pegging. But the rate pegging applies to rates.
Yes.
The various businesses, various operations we have at council, those charges are independent of the rate pegging amount.
So they're not connected to the rate pegging. You're not held back in that area.
No, exactly right. So the decision was made by council as part of the budget, 8.5%. That will go up, but that will go up from the 1st of January because the rates are normally set for a calendar year.
Right, okay.
So we've made the decision now, but that also gives parents time to say, well, let me have a look around. Are there other childcare operations that are better priced? Do I want to move my kids? Do I just accept the fact that I've been getting a pretty good deal so far? It gives parents 6 months to look at that.
Okay.
And often parents make the decision around a calendar year because that's when their kids are going into school or whatever. So those decisions can be made for them next year. But again, that decision there, we need to keep a sharp eye on our business operations and the finances there to be fair to our ratepayers across the city.
Absolutely. Well, I suppose the next question is in regards to future budgets. You talked there about rate pegging in regards to it and how, let's say, the inflation rate sitting somewhere between 7 or 8%. You've been told here by state governments that you can only raise the rates by 3.5%. You don't have to be an overly bright man to work out the fact that there's a bit of a difference there in regards to what the overall costs are increasing by, but what you're allowed to increase your costs by. So are we financially sustainable as a council?
For the next year, definitely.
For the next 12 months, we're okay.
That's right. And the budget's been approved on that, and we've got a financially sustainable position there.
Well, beyond that, is this something we can continue to do to sit at this 3.5% if that becomes a rate peak? Let's assume inflation drops to a reasonable level again. But I suppose year by year, you're going to have to make that decision. But to me personally, if I'm sitting here going, if this continues, how do we continue to operate as a council? Is this simply a case of we have to cut back services, or can we apply to increase the rate levels?
All valid questions. And the interesting process is that IPART, the independent pricing and regulatory tribunal makes a decision each year on how much councils can put up their rates by. So this year it was 3.7%.
Yep.
But as we've talked about, inflation's probably been running at 7%. So hold on, that doesn't make sense. Can that keep happening? Now, again, Philip Lowe certainly hopes that the interest rate, the inflation rate doesn't sit at 7%.
Something here.
That's
Exactly.
right. But and for example, if inflation was at 3 or 4%, IPART might say you had to put your rates up by 2%. If we look at the next financial year, then these are the rates that have gone up by 3.7%. That's done. But other councils, there have been 17 councils. There's 128 councils in the state.
Right.
17 of those have applied for what's called a special rate variation.
Okay.
And those have been quite significant in some cases. So if I give you some quick examples, Armidale have applied for approximately 50% rate increase.
What?
Over a 3-year time frame.
Oh, okay.
So
right.
that smooths out a little bit.
Though.
It's significant.
Yeah.
Tenterfield has applied for an 86% rate increase over 2 years.
86%.
So it's close enough to 100%. So that's basically
How
doubling
do you
your
justify
rates.
that? Like that's incredible.
And they do have to justify it. That's the thing. You've got to put a submission into IPART to justify that. Lithgow Council, they've actually put a submission in that had a variable one, which I haven't normally seen. Normally you put in for a specific amount, but they put in somewhere between 38 and 46%.
What, for 1 year?
For 1 year, in a 1 year hit.
Wow.
And this is the problem we've had. Because rate pegging has been in place for so long, councils typically leave the rate pegging in place. They go along at that rate. They try and make sure that they fit the services to the income they've got coming in.
Yeah.
And then sometimes they do a bit of a catch-up and do a
it
bit of
feels
a
like
jump.
a catch-up sort of moment that we're so far behind, we have to get this money in somehow.
Yep. Now, one of the things that we did in our resolutions from the last council meeting was that we said we would actually do over the next year some community engagement, a bit of education with the public around our financial position and the potential for a special rate variation. Now, the whole point of that discussion with the community will be, here's our financial position. We want to make sure we're sustainable for the long term, not just for the next 12 months.
Yep.
And so if we keep the rates just at the rate peg amount, we think that we will have to start to remove or reduce some services, and this is what that might look like. So the highway mowing, for example, it's just one random example. No, we're not going to be able to do that highway mowing or whatever it might be. So that whole piece around education and looking at that, that's where it'll be part of the process to communicate, do some consultation. Or if we like to keep the services we've got now, and if you want to get some extra things that you might like the sound of and might like to keep adding in the community,
it's going to come at a cost.
It's going to come at a cost. And what might that be? We might come up with a number and put some scenarios to the public. Again, none of this is saying that we're going out and applying for a special rate variation. Sometimes councils make the decision first and then go out and do the consultation to let people know what they're doing. But we thought we'd take a slightly different approach and just have that conversation with the community. And if we hear from the community that they really want to keep improving the community, add extra services, et cetera, then the community is more or less saying, yes, I'm okay with some form of increase. Now, I would never like to be on a council that starts to talk about some of those 50%, 86%, some of those sort of amounts. That seems incredible.
Absolutely.
I've only ever been involved in one special rate variation in all my time on council, and that was specifically for the theatre.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And to build the theatre, we went out, a lot of public consultation, a lot of discussion with the community around the theatre. And then at the end of all that, we went out and did a 2-year 2.5% rate increase. So 2.5% 1 year, 2.5% increase the next year. And that was specifically that money was
that on
for
top
the theatre.
of the normal sort of
Correct.
rate increase?
Yeah, so the normal rate pegging plus 2.5% for 2 consecutive years. And that was a pretty comprehensive process. And we had a really big thing that people wanted to build, majority of people, not everyone, but the majority of people wanted to build in the community. So that was I think, pretty good process that we went through, and people were generally accepting of that process. So I found that a good experience, but again, I really wouldn't like to be, and I have talked to some of these other councils about some of these rate increases, and obviously they're getting a fair bit of pushback from the community around these high increases. So keep an eye out for that. That'll start next financial year, just that general education and discussion. And tell us what you think. Tell us whether you want fewer services at the same cost or more services for more cost.
Yeah. Now, sort of moving on from the budget, there's a little interesting little one that sort of came up here during the week in regards to, I'm going to try to talk this through with you. It's the first ever moment where the Wellington Aboriginal Action Panel and the Dubbo Regional Council have joined together in a partnership agreement. Now, what's actually happened here? What is this partnership agreement and what's it about?
Let's go back just one small step.
Sure. Back
in my last time as mayor, and I'm just trying to remember, it might have been around, say, 2015 was the last time I did it, we had an MOU between...
MOU?
Memorandum of Understanding.
That's it.
Yep, that's fine. Between the Dubbo Aboriginal Community Working Party, the not very good acronym of DACWP, but anyway, Dubbo Aboriginal Community Working Party and Dubbo City Council, and that MOU basically just laid out some ways that we would interact with each other.
Right.
And again, the last time I remember signing that was about 2015.
Yeah.
Go forward, amalgamation, new council. For whatever reason, the new council didn't choose to go forward with anything like that. And when I came back on the council, I was talking to some Aboriginal people about a particular thing in the Aboriginal community, and I said, well, we've got an MOU, so let's go and look at that and let's see how we can interact with that. But then when I looked, we didn't have an MOU. I assumed we did because we used to have before, and I thought it would have just kept rolling over. Typically, you sign these for maybe a 2-year time frame. Yep. So I said, well, we need to get that fixed up. So we spoke to the Aboriginal Community Working Party and put together an MOU. And on the 14th of June last year, we then signed that agreement with the Aboriginal Community Working Party and Dubbo Regional Council.
So what does the agreement actually look like? What are some of the details of it?
Well, let me get to that. Just 1 second. Sorry. On the back of that, we then talked to the Wellington Aboriginal Action Panel, which has got the much better acronym of WAP.
Yes.
It's got 2 A's in the middle.
Yes.
And we talked to them and they said, well, we think we should have an agreement in place as well. Okay. And I absolutely agree. I said, yes, definitely we should have that. So we then signed a partnership agreement. Now, they didn't have one previously with Wellington Shire Council. So this was a first one that they'd ever had in place. What does it mean? It really just puts some rules in place for things that happen anyway. And that's sometimes what you do with some of these policies and agreements. And one of the things that's really important, I think, in this scenario, it's a bit like an employment agreement. If you all just act nicely and use common sense, you never need an employment agreement. But sometimes things happen that maybe a different person comes along or something happens that someone doesn't like. It's nice to have things written down when everyone's talking in a friendly fashion to say, well, what are the rules around this? How do we do this? Oh, let's go and look at the policy we all agreed and all signed when we're all happy with it. Because obviously these policies go out to the various people in the organisations and then there might be some changes and then you come back and modify and there's draft copies, etc., till you finally get to that last one. And really what it is doing what you would think you should do anyway. Dubbo Regional Council and the Aboriginal community, in this case of Wellington, but obviously previously Dubbo, are going to work to make sure we've got a good community where we're all one, we're all working together, we're communicating, we're doing things together. For example, NAIDOC, when NAIDOC events are on, we'll do a flag raising on council land with NAIDOC to make sure we celebrate NAIDOC. There's reconciliation plans we're working on. It's really just to say, let's all get along friendly, let's all be nice to each other. But just in case something happens where things are a bit tense for whatever reason, let's go and look at the document we all signed and just see how we should deal with it in that scenario.
So does it only deal specifically with any issues that would involve Aboriginal people, or is it a general type of agreement?
Absolutely, it's about Aboriginal interactions with the Aboriginal community in this case, the Wellington community and the Dubbo community.
Would it have anything to do with building constructions or anything like that, on sites or anything like this?
No, it really is focused on just the relationship, if you like, and it's really about cementing the relationship we've got in place. In an ideal world, you would never need a contract. In an ideal world, you'd never need a solicitor, but that's a whole other issue. But in an ideal world, you wouldn't need a contract. And an employment contract is a classic. I once heard one person talk to me at a conference, or not talk to me, speak at a conference, and they said the day an employee goes to the bottom drawer to pull out their employment contract is the day you've got a problem.
That's right.
Because it means there's some issue that they go, I want to check the rules on this. Yeah. And all of these things are exactly the same. There are times people have differences of opinion, and that's fine. We're all individuals. That's great. So these sort of agreements are in place to make sure that when those differences of opinion happen, we've got some rules of engagement. But generally it means we're going to strive to work together for the betterment of the entire community. How can we do that? A whole bunch of different ways that we can do that. And most of the ways are ways that are just common sense. You'll never go and look at that document, but it's there in case you need it. And we did the signing at the Malian, and I hope I pronounced that correctly. I'm not sure if I ever get that right, the Malian Cafe down in Wellington. And that's a perfect example of council working with the Aboriginal community. So we've, for example, got a cafe and an art space in Wellington at Cameron Park. They're facilities that council owns. Council's spent money. We've received grants previously to spend money to do those facilities up. So we've got a wonderful working cafe and this art space. And so we've actually leased those to the Aboriginal community in Wellington for $1 a year. We want the Aboriginal community to go and use those facilities, employ Aboriginal people, give people a start in terms of getting their first job maybe, use that art space to get some people that are involved in art in Wellington. Can you have an exhibition here? Can you sell some of your artwork, some of your paintings, some of your didgeridoos, etc., out of that space? Because again, I think some of the solutions we see for people in the Aboriginal community, some of the solutions we see for people in low socioeconomic environments is getting work where, again, they can have pride in themselves but also earn some money. That all sounds like a fantastic outcome. So, again, we did that agreement without having this partnership agreement in place. But it's those type of things. What opportunities do we have? How can we improve that? I mean, one of the discussions I had, which we won't talk about in detail today, but I had a discussion with the New South Wales Telecommunications Authority during the week, and one of the issues that I talked about there was Nenema Village. Out at Nenema Village, which is just on the outskirts of Wellington, the other side of Wellington as you're coming from Dubbo, there's no mobile phone reception there. And I did hear about one terrible story where someone did have a heart attack in the shower and they had to get on a mobile phone. One of the kids had to run to the top of the hill to get a mobile phone call out to try and get some emergency services out there. We're living in 2023.
That's right. It should never happen.
That's right. Now, again, signing this partnership agreement doesn't mean we're going to go and get someone to build a tower out there and suddenly have mobile phone reception, but it's just working towards good outcomes for the community and the Aboriginal community, walking together, walking hand in hand.
So it's also about, obviously, respectful protocols and making sure those sort of things are established appropriately as well. Is that the type of thing too? Or
all those things. So, again, you'd hope that happens anyway, but we've got a document there. And anyone that's interested, it's a public document. I encourage people to go and read it. And some people might say, oh, no, I'm horrified by this. This is terrible. And we'll, again, typically re-sign these every 2 years' time. But if someone said there's some drastic thing there, we've made a mistake, and both parties agreed to it, then certainly you could go and change it. But it really is just signalling that we're working with our Aboriginal community in both Dubbo and Wellington to really achieve great outcomes. And I actually think it's been really positive. Every council I've been involved with has had at least one Aboriginal councillor, so Rod Towney last time, and this time we've got two in Pam Wells and Lewis Burns. But I just think having those general conversations and understanding the different needs and desires of all parts of our community, and keep in mind, we've actually got a good mix on council because we've now got 15.6% of our community is Aboriginal.
Right.
We've got 18.5% is multicultural. Sorry, I shouldn't say multicultural. 18.5% were born overseas.
Yes.
So we've got this real melting pot of history that goes back 60,000 years and history that goes back 5 seconds. And having Shibli Chowdhury on council representing, if you like, I mean, we're all representing everyone, but essentially representing the fact that we've got this great community that's born overseas. I mean, Shibli's only been here for 10 years and he's on council.
That's right.
So that's that great melting pot. So I think we're doing a really good job. Is it perfect? No. Can we get better? Yes. Hence we have these sort of agreements in place. But gee, I think we're going well in getting everyone to come together as one community, and that's ultimately what we want. We don't want to see people as multicultural, born overseas, Aboriginal. We want to see people as people. And once you get rid of colour and race out of your eyesight, then you just see people as people, and that's got to be a better thing. But we're not there yet.
No.
So we've got
nice point, though.
We've got a little way to go.
Keswick Estate. Now, this land, we first started talking about Keswick Estate going back probably late last year. Now, there's still land available up there, as we know. Matt, what's happening here? Why is it taking so long to sell this land?
Well, so many people want to move to Dubbo.
Are we short on land and stuff like this? Is that the call, that we need more land, we need more building?
We need more housing. There's a housing shortage in Dubbo because everyone wants to be here in Dubbo, which is fantastic.
It's great. It's good.
Put some land for sale on the market, and we did it at auction, and we went well with the first auction, and the next two auctions didn't go so well. And now here we are. That was about October last year. Here we are in June, and we've still got lots of blocks for sale. So one of the things that we talked about at council was, hold on, maybe council staff are not skilled at selling blocks of land. That's not why they were employed. I'm sure in their resume it wasn't important to say real estate sales to get a job in our admin at council. So maybe our staff aren't brilliant at that.
So the blocks are now with the real estate agents, aren't they? So you can buy it through local agents here in town.
And that's exactly the decision we made. We said, well, let's get it out to the agents. So we put out a public expression of interest, and we had 6 agents who came back and said, yes, we'd like to sell those blocks of land. We went, great.
Excellent.
Your staff are skilled and focused on selling. So that's it. We'll get rid of all these blocks of land now. End of story. But it's not.
No, well, they're still not selling probably to the extent we'd like to see them sell.
That's exactly the problem. So we actually had an internal meeting during the week to say, what's going wrong here? What are we doing? Do we need to get rid of the fact that there are 6 agents selling it and just get it down to 1 agent selling it, for example? What is the problem here? Now, I didn't know, and I must admit most of the people in the meeting that we had didn't know, that these blocks are still not registered, which means you can't actually build on these blocks yet.
What? So people who have bought the initial blocks back in October, they still haven't put a house on it yet?
Still haven't been able to start to put a house on it yet.
Okay, the obvious question is why?
And that's a very good question. And before I answer the question why, I actually want to apologise to those people, because when you buy it at auction, now they were bought off plan. People knew they couldn't start building on it the next day. They knew they were buying off plan, but there was construction work to be finished and there were certain processes that had to be completed, and that was fine. So people would have realistically expected that maybe October, so maybe by February or March this year, they'd be building a house. But here we are in June, and they still can't build a house. And so what's happened during that time frame is there has been an issue with getting the construction, the physical construction of those blocks ready. So I'm talking about underground infrastructure, I'm talking about street lights.
Supply issue? Has there been problems with that, or what's actually gone on there?
I don't know the exact reasons. We obviously tender out these jobs and then there's a contractor that wins a tender and away they go and do the work. So I don't know the exact reasons. I know there have been issues in getting some materials. I know I talked to one developer, not on this project but on another project, and they said stormwater pipes that obviously have to go underground. Stormwater pipes, you might wait 12 months at the moment. In the past, you'd order some and next week they'd turn up because there's a stockpile somewhere. Now you order some and they say, sure, you're in the queue, and in 12 months' time you'll get them. So that underground infrastructure, and then if you've got that underground infrastructure, well, you're not going and dig one trench for one and then say, well, we'll fill it in, and then when the next thing comes that we need, we'll go and do that one. You want to do all that work at the same time. So I know there have been some delays possibly from that, and possibly just from lack of people. Here's the bit of a catch-22.
Common sort of problem across the board.
We don't have enough people, so we need more housing to house more people that want to move out here, but we can't get the housing without enough people to actually go and build the blocks that need to be built. So there's delays on both sides. Is this all
part of the reason why the blocks still aren't selling, because people know this is still part of the problem? Or
And that was the conclusion when we had this internal meeting about it. Well, people probably aren't going to buy the blocks if they still can't build a house on it yet. And so we thought it was a bit frustrating that they weren't being sold. And then we thought, well, maybe the agents, they're not really pushing them. But again, if I was an agent and someone walked into me and I say, well, I've got these blocks here that you can build on.
Tomorrow.
That's right. Or these blocks over here. And sometime in the near future, maybe you should be right to go. So that's been a bit disappointing. Again, I do apologise for that. So we wanted to go forward and say, well, what's our time frame? Talking to the contractor, getting some information back in terms of just the various processes that got to be completed. At an approximate estimate, it's probably 3 months.
Yeah, right. So it's still another 3 months until someone can start to build.
Probably talking about the end of September. Now, there's a pretty critical timeline here, or not pretty critical, a critical timeline here. When you buy a block at auction, you've got 12 months. If you can't then, if it's not registered, not ready for you to go in 12 months' time, you can say, no, I want money back, thanks.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay. So we're talking September before you can start, and October was when the first blocks were purchased. So you're almost at that 12-month period.
That's right. And that's disappointing for those people because, again, I'd be disappointed if I bought a block at auction going, whoa, that's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
And you pay your deposit.
Well, there's so much emotion associated with it, isn't there? You get excited. You can't wait. You've got the plan, the visions in the head.
Yeah. So from there till now, that's bad, but it might be September. So it might be 11.5 months before they finally get it.
That's possibly a best case scenario too.
Now, if it goes past that, people could, and they won't necessarily, but people could say, I'll cancel that, thanks, I'll get my money back. Now, we don't want that to happen. We want them to be finished, and we also want to keep selling them. So we've got the pressure on the contractor to say, please finish it off, not do a rush job.
Yeah.
Please finish it off. We need this finished so that we can get these blocks registered and people can start building them.
Just in regards to that, is there some sort of legal obligation that the contractor has, particularly if you're in a situation where you've bought a block in October of last year, is it council's problem or is it the contractor's problem in regards to getting the whole area set up and ready to go for people to go and build on?
Well, ultimately it's council's problem, but we've engaged a contractor and there might be certain timelines in that contract, and sometimes there are penalties if you don't finish things on time, etc. But it's probably the reputational damage as well. That's one thing that I'm certainly concerned about. People then say, well, don't buy a block off plan off council. They take forever to get it done. Surely they can just rush through their own DA. No, we don't. We still have a Chinese wall between our planning department.
It's a classic example of how it works, isn't it? That's right.
Yeah, that's right. And so our planning department does have to still approve DAs from our property development team, and there's all the same processes to go through there. But it is disappointing. I've apologised, and I do apologise again because I'm a bit disappointed about that. But I'm hopeful that once we get these blocks registered, then the sales will start to go, and we'll get a better indication then of what any issues might be once they're registered, once people can start building on them.
Old Dubbo Jail. It's a great spot to visit. Out the front right now, though, it's looking like a construction site. So tell me, I know this grand vision and the plan for getting this forecourt area done up looks absolutely magnificent. The plan looks fantastic. But are we any closer, Matt? Like I noticed during the week there that we had another site visit, checking out, I suggest, what's been uncovered underneath. This has been the big hold-up. But what's been uncovered and how long are we looking for before we can actually start this beautiful new forecourt area?
The brief recap is that we demolished some buildings there, and the contractors, we seem to have trouble with contractors at the moment, the contractors were under instruction to definitely not go below a certain level of the ground. There was a suspicion that there might have been some various bits and pieces under the ground at a deeper level, so when you clear up that car park there, don't go down too deep. And of course, they went down too deep, hit something, and then once they informed us, then we've got an obligation to go through a heritage process. It'd
be nice to maybe hit, I don't know, some big sections of gold or something there.
A chest. Yeah. Surely buried treasure.
Chest full of buried treasure. I love that idea. Right. That'd have been great.
They might not have told us about it, though. So they hit some footings there.
Okay.
Then we've...
Footings of an old building, was it? Or
Well, we weren't sure.
Okay.
So we talked to Heritage New South Wales. They said you've got to have a good look at what's there. We've engaged a consultant, and what we did the other day, we had a site visit, which was fantastic. Councillors, council staff went along and had a look, and they've dug down to a certain level, and I saw a wheelbarrow there and obviously some people there that were using instruments. You can't just come in with a big...
Oh, so it wasn't just a big picket sort of thing, there's big pickaxes sort of thing digging
nothing
away
like that,
there.
and nothing like a big scoop that just comes in on a bit of machinery.
Just rip it all out.
And I do remember when we visited Egypt at some time previously, there were lots of people still working around the pyramids, still trying to uncover things, but there were a lot of people with very small shovels or very small implements and wheelbarrows.
Yes.
It looked like very hard, hot, tedious work. At least the work that's been done here wasn't hot because it was in winter. But I imagine they were doing something similar where they were being very careful with their excavation.
Not to disturb anything. And
exactly
that sort of
right.
Stuff, yes.
And what they found was a whole variety of things. And so one of the consultants went through and spoke to us during the week about some of the parts that were found, and we're talking about 1850s, 1860s.
Okay.
We're talking about potentially a courthouse, maybe a previous wall of the jail.
Right.
There's plans that show a wall was in one spot, but it didn't look like the wall was built there because they probably progressed further than that. So a whole range of things, huge historical significance. So we said, well, this is fascinating. And at the moment, the way it looks is just looks like a bit of a rubbish tip for various bits and pieces. But when the consultant started explaining, here's this wall here, and you can see that that's probably 20 years difference from this wall here. And then you can see these bricks over here, they've been reused from this part over here.
Okay.
So, again, when you get some experts along...
So I suppose like you and I both sort of seen a lot of these old sort of setups around the place, around the world, and normally they put those lovely little... Perspex-y type things over the top. Is that the plan for this, to sort of just put a bit of a perspex over the top there, and you can look at it and say, oh, look, there's some old footings, happy days. Let's get into the jail.
That was the first question we asked. So obviously it was too big an area to put a perspex viewing platform over the whole lot. But
pick a little area.
Yeah, surely you could just pick one little spot here for a certain area. Now, what will happen from this is the consultant will do a report on what's been found.
Right.
And detail the various information, photos, they've done a 3D scan of it, all sorts of information. That'll go back to Heritage New South Wales.
Right.
Heritage New South Wales will then tell us what we're allowed to do in terms of a treatment. Now, when we mentioned the idea of some form of viewing, they said that if you did that, which is an option,
Right.
because that would then be exposed to the air rather than being covered underground, that little section, let's say, for example, we had a 1 metre by 1 metre or a 2 metre by 2 metre piece of perspex over a certain section, inside that, under the perspex, inside that would have to be humidity controlled and temperature controlled.
Is that right?
Now, the first reaction
For
is
some old rocks and things have been sitting there for 150 years. Or
that have been buried for that long. You go, well, they've been buried underground. Surely not.
Oh, no.
But exposing them could accelerate the decomposition of that, which would be bad. So therefore, if you want a viewing platform, sure thing, councils, we can have that, but it's just going to increase the bill dramatically to install it and to also keep it running because it's got to be humidity controlled.
Absolutely.
More than likely, the information or the recommendation that will come back from Heritage New South Wales will be to put a form of geofabric over everything that's been uncovered to protect it, then to put sand or some substance of a certain composition over that to then protect that, and then to put your normal soil on top to then go back and continue on with the normal project.
Wait a minute. Let me just get this right. It's just my poor little layman understanding here. So we've spent now the best part of the last 12 months getting this sort of process to the point now where we've discovered the fact that there's some old footings sitting in there. We've put all this money and effort into digging them all up to sort of see the fact, okay, this is what we got. Now you're telling me that the next process is cover it up again. Pretty much. What does it sort of say? But with some nice fabric over the top so it doesn't decompose. Can I ask, look, again, I probably sound very facetious, and all those people out there who are probably sitting there going, yeah, it's a very important process, and I'm sure it is. Can I ask you, why? Why do we need to sort of go through this process to turn around and cover it all up again? What are they going to dig it up again in 100 years and think there's some more footings there?
Let me go a bit further. Probably the recommendation from Heritage New South Wales will be also that we need to do some interpretive signage. So there might...
So you put a sign up.
We can
say, this is what it's got here. We've got the photos. This is what's
right.
under the ground here, folks. There's the sign.
Where you're walking, underneath that, here's what it looks like.
If that's the case, it's all worth it, obviously. Oh, no.
So we'll wait for the advice back from Heritage New South Wales. That's the state government.
Yep.
They outrank us.
Yes.
So they will tell us what to do. If we said, well, that's just stupid, which I'm picking up in the tone of your voice, you may be saying that.
No, surely not. Surely not.
So if we just said, that's just stupid, we're going to do what we like, we'd be in trouble from Heritage New South Wales. So we'll have to follow their recommendations, and we can have some back and forth with them, but ultimately we'll have to follow, even though it's technically council, community-owned property, that's our property, they will tell us what to do from a heritage perspective. Now, it may well be that we do work on some way to expose it and actually let people see it, because I personally think that would be fantastic. But if you tell me to cover that up with some perspex and have it humidity controlled, it's going to add hundreds of $1,000s and then add our bill of another, I don't know, $10,000 a year.
These things aren't cheap. You know, most of them generally aren't.
Not cheap to build, not cheap to run, I would imagine. But again, we'll have to look at that, look at the costings of that and get some community feedback.
Is this going to affect any of the current plans? Like, that's the other question, I suppose, in regards to it now. Do you have to do some changes now to the plans, knowing the fact that this stuff's under the ground? Because I'm assuming that, you know, you can't just now rip up some sections to put some cabling wiring in or whatever.
A couple of things will have to change. There is an artwork, a large artwork, which, as far as I know, has actually been finished. It's sitting up in Queensland at the moment, waiting to come down.
Yeah, right.
That will require some footings to go down on one edge of the building. Okay. So we'll have to be careful where we put those footings once we know that these parts are there. But the other thing we were going to do was we were going to move, there's a small substation on the site there, which is not in a great location. When there were buildings there, it was fine, but not in a great location when it's that nice open space that we're going to have. We were going to move that, and that obviously means taking the cables from where they are and running them across to another area. Now that we know that's all there and we can't really disturb much around that, then we'll probably have to leave that there and maybe put something around it because people can't go up and touch the little substation. Yes. So, and maybe that's where we'll put the interpretive signage, for example. You might put some signage around there with some pictures, etc. So it is frustrating. I get that. I'd love to have this area finished. Once it's opened up, it'll be utilised by a lot of people. I think it'll be fantastic. But again, we've got to go through this process and get it right. So, yeah, a bit frustrating, but it's happening. And you asked the question there, a time frame. That was a question that we asked as well.
Yeah, fair call.
And I've got no answer for you.
Okay.
It's each day that goes past, the end solution is a day closer. Does that help?
One day closer to rain, as they used to sort of say when the drought was on. It's a bit like that, isn't it?
That's right. So anyway, it's happening, it's progressing. As I say to everyone, part of my job is to make sure we communicate, let people know what's going on. I don't know that people always agree with what's going on, but at least they know the why and the what and the how, if not necessarily agreeing with it.
You have the patience of Job, I'll tell you. Now, Matt, getting back to the council meeting, there's a couple of things here I'd like to pick up in regards to it. One of the interesting sort of discussions that appears to have sort of picked up was in regards to this whole idea of setting up a resilience action plan. So I'm assuming this is in regards to council making sure that when the next drought hits, that we are better placed, I suppose, to be able to deal with the impact of the drought here on our city.
The best time to do some drought planning is when you've got rain.
Absolutely.
The best time to do flood planning is when you've got drought.
Yes.
And that's exactly the scenario here. So there's a notice of motion put forward for the council meeting during the week, which was approved by councillors, resolved by council, and that said that we want to see a report that looks at the strategies that have been implemented since the 2019 drought for some resilience. And we're mainly talking about water supply here, but just in general, in drought conditions, what have we done so far to create a more resilient community? Because
have we done some action since the last drought?
Absolutely, yeah. And I won't preempt the report, but certainly we've done some work with some bores, some pipelines to get water from bores when the river's not running as fast or not as much water in the river. So various actions like that. Even the way we do our tree planting, where we use what's called the Stockholm method, that can be argued would be a drought condition or not a drought condition, something that makes us more resilient when we do have droughts from time to time. So I think, yes, we definitely have. And that was exactly the idea. Councillor Ivey brought this one forward. That was exactly the idea to see, we've done some things. Let's actually have a look and collate those things we've done. And then the more important part, and this is where Councillor Ivey was definitely intending to go, the more important part was, now we can see what we've done, that might expose some holes. What are we planning? So what are the other things we're considering to make us more drought resilient? Because it's not if the next drought, it's when the next drought.
Absolutely, it's going to be, isn't it? That's right.
And if we're doing our planning properly, we'll say, gee, look at that, we've got these things in place. Glad we did that when things were looking okay, because now, gee, we're really using that.
Is this going to be something then maybe too for, in regards to, talk about budget there today, is this something maybe for next year's sort of budget situation, that you have to start planning, putting these sort of measures in place now, putting in anticipation of next year's budget?
That's an excellent point, because how much would you spend on some of these extra strategies? Oh, I don't know. Well, that's not really the way you plan a budget. Having some of these strategies that are required, it may, and again, I don't want to preempt what councillors might do, but the report may come back and it may say, well, we've done these things, but what we should be doing is we should be looking at also doing A, B and C. And then the next logical question from a councillor might be, okay, what are those going to cost? And then you might put those in a future budget because you might want to undertake those actions. But at least knowing the cost of something means that you can actually start to budget for it.
Yeah, sounds like a good idea. That's an interesting little one that got raised. I never really thought too much about this, but I can see why it may well be a point that you can sort of start to talk about in regards to the auditing of the signs across the urban areas of our local LGA. There's a lot of little signs up all over the place, aren't there? You go along and some are in immaculate condition and others are not so immaculate, let's just put it like that, that are sort of acknowledging certain things that are happening in certain areas. It might be a building, it might be a park area, it might be a sign acknowledging a bridge or whatever. And it looks like there's going to be an audit done of these signs. So talk me through it. What's the plan here?
This is all driven by the fact that sometimes in your own house, you walk in and out of your house and don't notice a spider web in the corner. Someone else walks in, a visitor walks in, and they go, oh, how come you got a spider web up there? And we thought about this from a visitor's perspective. We all live in our community. Councils all live in our community. And we drive around and walk around and look at things, and you're probably used to seeing things a certain way, but when a visitor turns up, they might think, gee, I'd like some more information on that, but this sign, I can't really see it. It's a bit faded. Or I'd like some more information on that, and that sign looks like it's a bit damaged. So the idea here is that let's look at the signs. We're not talking about street signs. We're talking about council own signs effectively.
Signs that acknowledge a person or a place or a thing. Is that the sort of the idea, those type of signs that are around the place?
That's right. And there's a perfect example on Trackarati where the old White Street Bridge, so the bridge that was before the LH Ford Bridge,
Yes.
the White Street Bridge, there's a sign there to show that. And that looks in old, poor condition. It's hard to read. There is already a process in place to replace some of the signs around Trackarati, but that type of thing, there's still some signs that are signed off by Tony Kelly. Tony Kelly hasn't been the General Manager of Council since 2004.
No.
It just looks a bit clumsy. It looks like we don't, not so much not care about the community, but we're just not keeping up to date with it. There's signs that still refer to Dubbo City Council or Wellington Shire Council. We've been amalgamated now for 7 years. Surely we could get to the point where we could fix up some of those. So it was really just a bit of a update, refresh. The first step will be an audit to see what signs are out there, what signs might need to be changed, modified, improved, etc.
Is there a record somewhere in council in regards to where all these signs are placed? I hope so. It might be a long walk around the city for some people otherwise.
Yeah, I don't know, actually. I have no idea whether there's a good record. I would actually guess not.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these signs will be done in different projects, and it might be that standard silo example where each department, each area does a sign relating to their particular area, but I don't know there's a central database. And that may be, they may do that as a result of this process to say, well, we need to keep up to date with these signs. And are they all relevant anymore, and what can we do? And that would be actually a really sensible thing to do, to then look at where future signs might be needed.
It's probably going to require a bit of people input as well. I'd suggest they might be sort of asking, do you know of a sign that's nearby your place or on your property or whatever, those sort of things as well?
And that might be a really good way to go about it as well. Have one of our staff actually look at what's there, but also then invite some consultation from the public to say, tell us about a sign that you might think needs a bit of an update, a bit of a refresh, or just the wording change, just fixed up, because some of those signs have been there for a long time.
Absolutely. Now, last week, Matt, we talked about the alcohol and drug rehab centre over there, the proposed drug and rehab centre over there, where the location is going to be over there in Spears Drive. Now, the question I asked you last week was in regards to why was it minuted down as one of the points there for the discussions last Thursday night. So talk me through it. How did the discussion go last Thursday night in regards to it?
A few things actually I'll talk about in relation to this. There was a gallery that was pretty full on Thursday night, which was great. I love to see people in the gallery.
It's always good to get the public in there.
Oh, yeah, it is. And in the old days before we had streaming, we used to get a fair few people in the gallery regularly, but now people can sit at home in their pyjamas and watch a council meeting.
Of the heater and that as well.
Yeah,
yes.
So, but it was good to see a full gallery. Now, a few of those people were there because they were interested in the budget. There were some people there who were focused on one particular part of the budget around dogs. Some people there who wanted us to take fluoride out of the water. Well, it's not in there at the moment, but they don't want to put it back in. So they talked about all the dangers of fluoride in our water. And there were some people there that focused on the alcohol and drug. And so that's great. And public forum is always interesting. And for the first time ever, I can't remember doing it in my last term of council, the entire term of council, and I certainly can't remember doing it as mayor. We have our code of meeting practice, and it's very strict. Again, you talk about the rules you have in place around the partnership agreement, and this is the sort of thing. Our code of meeting practice is very strict in everything that it's got in there. These are the rules you must follow in terms of a meeting, and myself as the chairperson of that meeting, I must make sure people adhere to that. We have a section there called public forum. Right. Public forum states you've got 30 minutes for public forum. Each speaker is allowed a maximum of 5 minutes to speak. Right. And so what I do as a standard thing, just to make it easier for people, to say rather than 5 minutes and I just cut them off, at 4 minutes 30 I've got a bell, I ding the bell. At
that's
5 minutes
I'll adjudicate a timekeeper sort of thing. There it is.
That's exactly where I've stolen it from. And then at 5 minutes I ding the bell a couple of times and say that's it, your time is now finished. And so that's fine, and so you get to people talking. Not everyone uses their 5 minutes. They say what they've got to say. But you have got a maximum of 30 minutes. For the first time ever, certainly in my time on council, we reached that 30-minute time limit.
Oh, did you really?
And so I had to say that's it for the time limit. But again, go back to the code of meeting practice. The code of meeting practice allows me to ask if any councillors wish to extend the time. And so a councillor can then move a motion from the floor to say, please extend the time, say how long they extend it for. You can debate that amount and then we can continue on. So a councillor moved that, please extend the time by 20 minutes. We did that. That was resolved. And so then we can continue on with public forum. Right. We only had about another 4 or 5 minutes left of people to talk.
Public forum for only an hour. Wow.
Well, it ended up being probably 35, 40 minutes, which, again, is fantastic.
Well, it's good to get the community input, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. So some of the people that spoke at Public Forum spoke still with a lack, and I don't want to be rude to these people, but they still didn't understand council's role with the Alcohol and Other Drugs Rehabilitation Centre. Some people stood at Public Forum and said, we don't think the model you've got's right. Detox shouldn't be done there. Now, I have no idea where detox is being done. I'm not an expert on these types of facilities, but detox shouldn't be done there. Can you please move the detox from this facility and do the detox up at the hospital? Now, Public Forum is not designed for question and answer. And in fact, another part of our code of meeting practice says that it's not designed for public to ask questions and get answers back.
I'm sure you must have felt like saying, go and talk to State Health.
Well, that's the sort of problem it really was, that you really want to say sometimes in Public Forum, no, that's wrong, but people are having their say. So they were saying, please move this part of it. And again, it's not our facility.
No.
We don't decide what operations are being undertaken in that facility. Some people were saying, council, please support this notice of motion going forward. It's really important you support this notice of motion. And it was Councillor Pam Wells who brought forward the notice of motion. Please support Councillor Wells in this notice of motion. We really need to move it from Spears Drive to Bungle Gumby Drive. And again, the motion didn't actually say that. So people hadn't really taken a lot of notice of exactly of the wording of the motion. Now, again, I'm not trying to be harsh on people, but we've got to follow what's written down.
Yep.
A couple of things there before I talk about the motion. One thing that I think Councillor Wells did really well was there is a not often used part of a council meeting called question on notice.
Right.
Sometimes people use a notice of motion as a way to communicate or point out something to the public, because the public looks at the meeting papers and we talk about them at council. But it's a bit of a clumsy way to use it sometimes. The questions on notice is a much cleverer way to use it. So if you've got something you want to highlight to the public or some information you want to get from council, sure, as a councillor, you could just send an email to the CEO and say, can you give me this information? But a nicer way to do it sometimes, if you want the public to know about it, is to put a question on notice.
Right.
So Councillor Wells did put a question on notice and wanted to know all about the timeline and the various public commitments we had around provision of land from council to the Department of Health or Western Local Health District in relation to the Alcohol and Other Drugs Rehab Centre. So that was good. That gave a really good timeline. I know you'd probably say,
listen to last week's podcast.
There you go. Listen to last week's podcast. Because it did.
I didn't want to say it, but anyway.
it did lay it out fairly clearly. But also now in our business papers, you've got the timeline of all that background and making it incredibly obvious to everyone that there was no prior resolution of council to give away a parcel of land. So that was all there on record. But before I get to the notice of motion, the other part that was interesting was that as a result of the May council meeting, where council formally opposed the location in Spears Drive. Yes. So that's a council resolution. We also said we continue to work with Western Local Health District to find a suitable location. So part of that, I sent a letter off to Ryan Park, the minister, and said, here's a council resolution, put the exact wording of it there. We oppose the current location. We're happy to continue to work with you. Now, I waited a couple of weeks. I thought that was a reasonable time frame for an answer to come back.
Normally it is for most people, sort of think 2 weeks should be more than enough.
And I sent another email to say, I've sent this email and I've received nothing back. Is there anything else, or did you not receive it, or whatever? And I received an answer back to that one then and said, we've received your email. It's been recorded and yes, it's entered the system. It's being reviewed at the moment as we speak, and we'll come back to you.
Right.
On the day before the council meeting, a media release was put out by the minister. Right. And the minister talked about the health facility and that they're working towards different things and there's different options. And so I saw the media release. I got sent that by...
Why didn't they send you this information prior to, though? Like, why'd you have to wait for a media release to get it?
And it did seem strange. I know another minister from the current state government actually talked to me about another incident where there was a conversation going on via media releases between the government and a different organisation, and they weren't overly impressed with this idea of communication via media release. And I thought, well, that's exactly what's happening here. So I actually sent an email back again to the minister and said, I received a copy of this media release last night from the media. I wonder if there's a formal piece of communication that's going to come out. By the way, there's a council meeting on Thursday night. I'd really like some formal communication back from the department to take to that council meeting
Yeah.
rather than relying on the information in a media release.
Yeah.
But I haven't received any response to this point in time.
Now, I can say this because I'm sitting here, but I find that incredibly rude, to be honest. The fact that you're in a situation there like that where Dubbo City Council are one of the major stakeholders from the point of view within the whole operation here, and when the Mayor himself is actually asking for some information in regards to what's the New South Wales Health considering in regards to this, and to find out via a media release rather than any sort of personal contact, I'm sorry, but that's as rude as hell. It really is.
And the media release had a few errors in there, so it did look like it was a bit of a rushed media release.
Yeah, right.
I mean, one of the things, I won't get into the grammatical errors and the incorrect use of the word alternate and alternative, but one of the things that I thought was significant in there, and again adds to that council confusion, was the reference that it had in terms of the transfer of the program or the whole process from council to the state. And that's where a bit of confusion. I'll read one sentence from you. This is one sentence out of the media release. Dubbo Regional Council originally proposed this facility in 2018, and responsibility for constructing the facility, along with associated funding, was transferred to Western New South Wales Local Health District in 2022.
When did council ever agree to turn around and construct the facilities?
And that's exactly the point. So that's obviously...
This came from the minister.
This is from the minister, presumably signed off by the minister. From the department, it came out as a media release. So that was one glaring
Not
error.
rude, he's also wrong.
And I probably shouldn't say that, but
No,
but you can say
that's
that.
right. I can, but you can't.
Yeah. So the media release talked about a few things, and some people thought this media release was now a game changer and was now saying that council had this fully within its control, but it doesn't. And again, I'll read a couple of other excerpts from it for you before I get to the notice of motion. It says that Western New South Wales Local Health District has acquired a site on Spears Drive that it can move forward with to undertake community consultation and planning. So it sounds like they're moving forward. It says New South Wales Minister for Regional Health, Ryan Park, has encouraged the Dubbo Regional Council to come forward with alternate locations for the Dubbo Rehab Centre. As I said, incorrect use of the word alternate, but pretend you had the correct word there, alternative. That's fine. We've done that.
Yep.
We've been doing that over the years, and our last resolution of council said exactly that. At this stage, we can count a minimum of 16 sites across the city where we've said, here's a location that we think would be suitable. Spears Drive was not one of those sites. We never suggested Spears Drive. That was nothing that ever came across any discussions. They never came to council and said, oh, what about Spears Drive? Do you like the idea of that? We got as big a surprise about Spears Drive as the Spears Drive community got when it was announced in February this year.
So there's no notification saying this is what we're going to declare as well. So that doesn't surprise me right now.
That's right. Now, it also says things like, council-owned land at North Bungalgumbi was previously considered as a potential site by the LHD, and initial investigations by the LHD indicated it could be appropriate, but in 2022, council staff advised that it was no longer available.
Because of
And that's right. And I would
Northwest
say
Precinct now.
I would say no longer suitable.
Yeah.
That's right. But again, they're not saying definitely, oh, look, they're going to move it to North Bungalgumbi if you offer that again. I'll go on. If council has alternatives, such as the North Bungalgumbi site, that meet the requirements of the nature of the service, that can be transferred to the local health district, and which can be made ready for the project without substantial delays, then I urge them to bring those alternatives to the table so they can be carefully considered. Well, we've been doing that.
Yeah.
But again, they talk about they don't want delays. They talk about further no-cost blowouts. So in general, what this media release says is nothing.
That is so frustrating.
So on the back of all that, we then get to the notice of motion. Now, the notice of motion for Councillor Wells, and I'll read it exactly so I don't misrepresent this in any way, shape or form. Point 1, that Council note its support for the construction of an alcohol and other drugs rehabilitation facility for the Dubbo region.
So it doesn't specifically say, because the actual motion right now is the fact they're opposing Spears Drive as a point of development.
Correct. So that point 1, that's a pretty easy one.
Yep.
Yes, all supportive. Point 2, that the CEO provide a report to the July 2023 Ordinary Meeting of Council addressing the financial, regulatory and legal matters around the provision of land for AOD rehabilitation facility. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't say anything about a specific parcel.
No.
It's being quite sensible.
It's about the process.
Exactly right. It's saying, well, if we were to provide a parcel of land, and that doesn't say gifted, it says the provision of land, so that might be selling land, it might be giving part of it. Is it giving away all the planning or the rezoning, the sewerage, the water, all the rest of it?
Take away the question marks. Just this is the process.
That's right. So this is really a report that will come back to July just to outline to councillors, if you were considering some land, here are the things you need to consider in part of that process, which demonstrates further there was never a previous resolution to give land away because obviously they would have had to go through that process previously to get to that point where they're giving it away. So that's fine. There'll be a report that comes back to the July meeting of council, which will outline those processes. And then from there, council can decide what they do as the next step.
Yep.
In the meantime, reading that media release, it seems to me more like they're probably going to continue. Now, we oppose it. We still oppose it. There's no doubt about it. There's a formal resolution. We oppose it. We don't think it's the right location.
Yep.
We don't think any residential area. So as much as Spears Drive is not appropriate, in North Bungle-Gumby is not appropriate. But there are other parcels of land, absolutely. As I said, there's been at least 16 parcels of land that council has spoken about with Western Local Health District to try and get to the point where they come up with a decision. They say, yes, that's a good place to put it. But again, I don't know if I've mentioned this before, this is not a decision of council.
That's right.
If people in Spears Drive have got concerns, they obviously do.
Yeah.
You need to speak to the state government.
Yeah.
The state government, Ryan Parker's the minister, the health department, Western Local Health District, the state government will make the decision. There is not a single thing that council can do to change the government's mind. If we could do that, we would have already done it. We've got a formal position that says we oppose the location. So if we had it within our power, then we would have already done it. If we had it within our power, there'd be a council who would have moved a resolution to say, we say we're going to get the state government to build the facility elsewhere. We don't have that power. All we can do, again, residents can do, is keep talking to your state government representatives and get them to change the location of it.
Absolutely. And let's hope that Ryan Park replies.
And let's hope I get something from Ryan Park.
Now, Matt, moving on to something completely different. In regards to, though, it was raised up there in regards to Thursday night, it appears as though that all the tenders have now been received for the new contract for the Dubbo Regional Council Aquatic Leisure Centre. So, where are we standing?
So at the moment, it was a confidential report, so I can't talk about the exact content of the report, but I can talk about the outcomes. At the moment, we received a variety of tenders. Some of those tenders were open to taking all three locations. That's Dubbo, Geary and Wellington.
Right.
Some tenders said they just take, and tenders is the wrong word, proposals, because this wasn't a tender process, it was a proposal process. Yep. Some proposals said they just take Dubbo. No proposals came in to say they take Wellington by itself or Geary by itself or Wellington, Geary together.
But as a three, it's okay.
Correct. So this is the decision councillors had to make was, where do we go with this? Do we have someone that takes all three? Do we have someone that takes one in Dubbo and leaves the other two internal? Where do we go with this? So at the moment, what we've said is we've recommended that we take a proposal from one of those organisations, and that's an organisation called Belgravia Leisure.
Right.
So we've said we recommend going that way, but we're not making a final decision on that until the 30th of June.
Okay.
We've given the CEO permission to undertake further negotiations. We've delegated that to him just to confirm costings and make sure we get every part of that right. And then that'll come back, as I said, to a meeting on the 30th of June. Now, that meeting will be presumably a fairly short meeting. There'll be one item on the agenda, which will be to decide on the pool. Now, that, even though we've gone so far at this stage with a recommendation around Belgravia, that doesn't mean they're going to get it. But obviously, they're in a stronger position than anyone else, like being ahead at half time. You're in a stronger position. So that discussion will occur, information will come back, and then a final decision will be made to whether to go external or internal, and also to choose which one of the various proposals we receive, which one to go with. And again, Belgravia Leisure at the moment is the one that the CEO is having discussions with, but councillors could still go with a different one if they needed to.
Well, I think come around about that 30th of June, we'll pick it up then. I said in regards to talking further about the discussions then. Now, it appears as though during the week, of course, that Mr. Mark Colton, 15-year anniversary dinner. That's a big achievement there for one of our local members here.
It's a fair commitment of your life,
15
isn't
years,
it?
it's a long time, isn't it, in
That's
regards
right.
to federal politics?
And I've got to say, everyone that spoke on the night, whether it be on a microphone or just privately,
Yes.
spoke about the Mark and Robin team.
Oh, right,
'Cause
yes.
Robin,
yes.
his wife,
Behind every great man's a great woman, as they say.
well, beside in this case,
oh, of
because
course, yes, that's
Robin does.
far more politically correct these days.
Well, but I suppose my point there is that Robin basically travels with Mark.
Oh, okay.
Wherever Mark
Yeah,
goes,
right.
pretty much Robin's there.
Yeah.
And so the government really gets a free employee because Robin goes along and helps out and does various things for Mark. So he's got someone else. And again, they do it because it's a lifestyle choice. Their kids have left home now, so Robin could sit back at home and do the knitting, or she could get out on the road with Mark, which she doesn't. I quite enjoy Robin's company as well as Mark's. So it's nice when you see them both together.
Wonderful.
And yeah, it is quite nice. So people did talk about that a lot, that said we've almost got a 2-for-1 deal from the government or the taxpayer's perspective.
Yep.
But 15 years is a fair commitment of your life.
absolutely.
So I think that's quite significant as well. But on the night, it was Friday night, the dinner was held, and you had the Honourable David Littleproud MP. So
Okay.
he's the leader of the Nationals at the moment
Yeah,
in the federal government. So he spoke. Actually, I sat at the same table as David, so I had a good chance. I did get to mention REAC to David as well.
Good.
Now, the state government's not responsible for the federal government's not responsible for renewable energy zones. The state government is, but it's just another chance to get REAC
Absolutely.
talked about,
Yeah,
and I talked about some of the concept and the proposal there. But again, it's just good to talk to David. And then Senator Jacinta Price, who's the Shadow Minister for Indigenous Australians, was also there.
she was there as well.
And that's
Okay.
right.
Yep.
And so they were the two draw cards, if you like, but Michael McCormick was there. He also spoke. But you had some ex-pollies as well, John Anderson,
Oh, right.
John Cobb, and I used to do a little bit with John Cobb previously when he was the member for both parks.
Like the National Party Illuminati there. They're all there.
It's a bit like that. So he was a member for Parks and then became the member for Clare, so that's around the Orange area. So I had a little bit to do with John in previous years, but I almost didn't recognise him because he didn't have his moustache. He used to always have this big
Yes, that's
bushy
right.
moustache.
Yeah.
So I had a chat to him. But look, a nice night, and I think one of the things that people talked about there on the night was that you do have politicians who get the title honourable when they're a minister. So federal government, you've got that title for life. And some of the pollies talked about this publicly. They said sometimes people have the title honourable, but the title is all they have. They said with Mark, it was the opposite. Before he received the title of honourable, he was always honourable and sincere and genuine and very much someone that you could rely on, you could trust. Yes, he's now got the title honourable, but it actually fits
That's
Mark.
right. It's almost like you earned that title.
That's
Yes.
right. Yeah. So anyway, it was a nice night, and it was actually Mark in his speech mentioned myself because he does still have scars on his bottom from a bike ride that I conned him into many years ago
I'm
to do
glad
some
you first
fundraising.
explained that one.
But he often talks about that in public when he'll say,
Yes.
I've got Matthew Dickinson over there, and 2013 he may be getting a bike and ride around, and it was a great fundraising event we did for Macquarie Homestay. But he likes to talk about that because,
Well, that was one of his big achievements, wasn't it, really? Like, he really pushed that.
well, probably secondary part of that, the Cancer Centre, he certainly had a lot to do with, but the Cancer Centre is here, but people need to stay somewhere. And so Macquarie Homestay fits in very nicely with the Cancer Centre there. So, yeah, look, a nice night. And again, congratulations to Mark from the bottom of my heart. I've enjoyed dealing with Mark all my time as mayor previously and now. There's only one federal member that the Parks Electorate has had, so the Dubbo has had,
Yes.
and that's been Mark Coulton. So it's been an absolute pleasure working with Mark. So congratulations
Absolutely.
on the
Hear,
15 years. He didn't say how many years he's going to keep going for, but he's done a sterling 15 years so far.
That's a great achievement. Well, mate, this gets towards the end of the show, and of course, it's time for your Limerick of the Week. So, boy, oh boy, I think we've covered so many topics in one podcast. We got through a heap there today. So, out of all those areas that we focus on, which one are you going to focus on for your Limerick of the Week?
I'm actually finding it harder to decide on which topic rather than actually writing the Limerick. The Limerick seems to come easier than going, all those things there, which one could I focus on?
Yes.
But I can't go past a Limerick about Mark Coulton.
Oh, well, that's nice. It's just very appropriate too, I'd suggest, after
that's
what
right.
we just spoke about.
So here we go for Mark. For Mark Coulton, let's raise a cheer. Serving Parks now into his 16th year. In the federal sphere he's a star, his influence felt near and far. He is known for being honourable and sincere.
Oh, well done. And well done again to the Honourable Mark Colton on 15 years of great service. Well, folks, that just about wraps us up for another podcast of Straight from the Mayor's Mouth. Until next week, everyone, you guys take care.
Straight from the Mayor's Mouth with Matthew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.